goodness. Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte, and we are live at the Build Studio in New York City. Our next guest has one of the coolest job titles ever. He's an investigative comedian and, of course, host of TruTV's Adam Ruins Everything, the show dead set on destroying whatever little bit of blissful ignorance you've been clinging to. But here's the thing. They will make you laugh while they do it, so it's okay. Now in its third season, this show has become one of my favorites. It's well-written, well-researched, and the host grows on you after a couple episodes, which is a good thing because that's who's here. Folks, in just a moment, joining me here on stage, the host of Adam Ruins Everything, the great Adam Conover is back. How about that, huh? We excited? I am. Thank you. That's good. That's good. That's good. We're all excited. We're going to bring him out here in just a second. It's going to be awesome. But first, I believe we have a trailer for the show. So let's go ahead and run that clip.
This country is in desperate need of gun control.
You want to take away my rights?
Neither of you know as much about gun violence as you think you do. The things we see and hear in our daily lives aren't always what they seem. Mexican drug cartels have infiltrated the avocado trade. That's why I'm here to lay out the truth so you can make your own informed decisions. Did you know entire industries are built on marketing ploys? Come on down to the mattress store. They've got so many scams, your head will explode! Most people think the airline industry stinks. Fresh. But it's worse than you ever thought. Excuse me. Sorry, this is my seat. I'm 23C and a half.
You cannot be serious.
Big tech promises a utopia, but the reality is more like a dystopia.
Technology serves the greater good.
Actually, that's a myth that technology companies use to take advantage of us. They are actually taking over the world, and they're doing it with our government's help.
Thanks, man. We'll totally pay you back with, like, making people's lives better or more convenient or, I don't know, whatever.
Adam Ruins Everything returns.
Is this another heart attack or another stress dream?
Neither. It's my TV show.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise. Mr. Adam Conover right here.
Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Adam, thank you so much. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, I'm very happy to be back. I had a great time last time.
It's so awesome you're here, and it's so awesome that you are making this show. I have grown to love this show quite a bit.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad we won you over eventually. It's an acquired taste, you know?
What I mean to say is I've become a little obsessed with it.
Oh, okay,
just
great.
watching the clips and stuff like that. Because, like I said earlier, you guys are masters at whatever blissful ignorance may have existed. It is gone. It's out the window. This is the real world. Here's what's going on. I love all the work that goes into it. I'm excited to talk to you about the latest and greatest season. But first
Very
and foremost,
excited to talk about it.
How are you? How are you doing? How is Adam?
I'm doing pretty. Oh,
Yeah,
my
you
gosh.
all right?
Oh, finally someone asks, you know? Everyone wants to know about how Adam ruins everything, but no one wants to know how Adam feels inside. You know, no, I feel good. I mean, it's been a real whirlwind year. We've been working on this batch of 16 episodes since last February, and we're about to hop in and shoot the last batch, which is going to be airing later this year. And yeah, I mean, it's an intense show to make, man. I mean, the show is not just a, narrative, half-hour comedy. It's also a fully researched, argumentative essay and, an incredibly, visual piece of sketch comedy. I didn't know when I created the show that I was creating maybe the hardest to produce show on television. I haven't worked on other shows, but, the amount that we really try to squeeze into every minute is a lot, yeah.
How has that process, now that you've got, a couple under your belt, how has that process evolved from year to year as you enter batch to batch? Are you finding ways to make it less challenging, but still more efficient, better, more exciting for you on the back end? How has it evolved over time?
Well, we always find ways to, rather than make it more efficient, to make it better, right? We look for ways to, our research process has gotten much better. And I will say more efficient, but we're packing more work into the same amount of time, more research into the same amount of time. We've been lucky enough to be able to add staff and really iron out our process to make sure that the stories we're telling and the facts that we're giving are as accurate as possible, So it's a matter of, as you do it, the first year I was just gutting it all out. We had a very small staff and we were all just, all right, everyone's just going to work 18 hours a day. Yeah. And then the trick is to figure out how to do the same thing while maintaining a normal life. But yeah, there's always there's always something to improve year over year. So even now I'm like, man, if we're lucky enough to have another year, here's what I'd like to improve. Yeah.
Have you found now that your most recent episode was the sitcom one, and you're tackling
Adam Ruins a Sitcom.
Yeah, Adam Ruins a Sitcom, and talking about amazing topics and tackling things like toxic masculinity and these terrible stereotypes that have plagued lazy
racial
comedy,
stereotypes.
racial stereotypes. Have you found that the networks are more willing or giving you more leeway in terms of like what you can cover and what you guys can talk about, and are they less afraid of what you're going to do, having seen the show for a little bit now? They're like, you know what? Sure, go ahead, talk about that.
I wouldn't say they're less afraid. I think we still get, when I'm on, I have a call where I pitch the topics to the network, and they still go, oh, okay, that is a tough one, and that company does advertise on the network sometimes. Okay, well, but they do. That is also combined with a lot of trust that we have in our relationship after doing this show for about 4 years now, and so they know that we don't take cheap shots and that we treat really difficult issues with nuance and with care and respect, and with good faith. And so they give us room to, I give them all the credit in the world for letting us tackle, for giving us the space to tackle what we tackle on the show. I mean, our show is really proof that, in my mind, people think that because you're on commercial television that you can't do good work, that you can't do intellectually rigorous, challenging, truth-telling work, that someone at like PepsiCo is going to tell you, nuh-uh, you can't say that, or say that you got to, your work has to be crappy. And our show is really proof that that's not true. We really are able to get our message out there clearly on a week-to-week basis.
Upsetting the corporate sponsors aside, is there like a list? Is there like a sacred list or a list of forbidden topics or lists of failed pitches that like one day I'm going to get them to say yes to this or anything like that?
The second one, not the first one. I mean, it's. I'll tell you this. There's exactly one topic that I wanted to do that we haven't done, and we actually. The reason I feel comfortable talking about it is, first I'll tell you what it is. I really wanted to do a segment last year. We were doing an episode on college, and I wanted to do a segment about the NCAA, right? Because the NCAA should be paying athletes. There is no reason for them not to be paying athletes. The guy who started the NCAA and came up with the idea of not paying the athletes later went on after he retired to compare the system to plantation slavery. His words, not mine. It's unconscionable, and there's no, you're watching these games, everyone's making billions of dollars except the players who are damaging their health by playing, right? The network said, that seems great. What we broadcast in March, right? TruTV, you know what they broadcast in March? Could you not, I was like, well, this is a topic. Hey, John Oliver's covered this. I would love to do it. I understand why we're not going to do that. But here's what I'll say about that. I did regret that a little bit. This year, we are doing a segment. It's going to come out later this year. It's actually going to be our finale coming out in a couple months. About one of the segments is us unpacking and discussing our relationship with the network in that way, and talking about these, those moments at which we've had to have a tough conversation about the content, right? And the network said, yes, we give you full room to talk about this on air, right? So, and that to me is really wonderful, because here's the thing. I always push to do everything that we can possibly do on the show. That's how I sleep at night. If there's something I want to do, I will push until I get a firm no. I don't self-censor, right? But that's the best I can do. No one is going to win 100% of all the battles. A reporter at the New York Times is going to tell you, well, there's one or two cases in which I didn't think I got to say, but I think the rest of my 98% of my work, speaks for itself, right? And so our show is the same way. But we were also afforded the opportunity to talk about that on air and to unpack that distinction. And so that is what I really give our network and our partners there a huge amount of credit for giving us the room to do that.
Can I ask a question without getting too inside baseball or like pulling
Sure.
the curtain too far back? What was it that led you to that pitch, that idea of, man, we should talk about this entire process? Because I imagine you're sitting in a room going, all right, air travel, mattresses. At what point does somebody go, we should do one about how this whole thing works and how we talk to them? Like, what led to that?
That's something that we've always been really interested in, that I've always been interested in, because I've always asked myself the question, why the hell should anybody listen to me, right? I'm just a comedian, I'm a comedian. I like to read books and magazines and listen to podcasts. I like this kind of information, and I like doing it on air, right? And it turns out I'm okay at it, right? So, but why should anybody listen to me beyond that? And so I've always looked for ways to be really honest about the process and unpack that and be self-critical of that, because that's transparency, and that's how you build that trusting relationship with the audience. So when I originally created the show on College Humor and we were just doing short web shorts, it wasn't until the third or fourth one where I was like, you know what? I want to start putting the sources on screen. I'm going to come up with a little like, drop down thing that'll say, here's what the source was, because guess what? Like, why should anybody believe me? So I'll tell them I did the work, right? Yeah. And then they can go look at the source. And then if the source has a problem, right, they can say, I can say, well, I don't know, I trusted the New York Times, sorry. Or I can say, oh my gosh, I didn't catch that. And we can have a conversation about that. So then after we did the show for a couple years, we have saved up a couple of those instances where people said, hey, actually, you were incorrect about this. I looked at your source and you were wrong. And so, all right, let's do a segment about that. We did a correction segment in an episode called Emily Ruins, Adam Ruins Everything. Yeah. And we talked about that. And we said, hey, the goal is not, nobody is perfect, right? That's a cliche, but it's also true. And just because we're not perfect at this, that doesn't make us untrustworthy. Our trustworthiness should be based on our transparency and our good faith and our growth, right? And the audience really came along with us for that journey, and said, yeah, okay, we get what you're doing here. We understand this is the process. And so we were just looking for another way to do that, right? So we are now doing a whole episode. It's going to be our finale this year. It's going to air sometime in the summer. That is unpacking all of the structural issues with our show that cause it to not be untrue, but that can be into conflict with telling the truth. Yeah. And one of those things is that it's on advertising-supported television, and sometimes we have to have those conversations. And that is a little bit difficult. It's a little bit at odds with my ethos, but that's what you have to do to be on TV, right? Unless you, yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I'm really fascinated by, and you mentioned here, is the relationship the audience has with this show, and specifically the relationship you and, like, recently your head writer has with your audience, where you guys, through social media, you will engage in conversations after these shows have aired. Has that conversation evolved over the years? And then I want to talk about specifically some of the conversations you guys have been in, because there's one person in particular, you called it the most adorable rebuttal I think you've ever had. We'll get to him in a second. But first and foremost, how has that conversation changed over the years? Has it changed? Has it evolved? Is it different now? Are people more vocal now? Talk about that.
I mean, yeah, they are very vocal. We have a bigger platform every year. More people are watching the show. More people have opinions about the show. And it's really important to me to engage with anyone who's making a good faith effort to engage with us, right? So there's a ton of, first of all, there's a whole ton of response. People make a ton of YouTube response videos, and I watch them. And there's a whole category of them that really start in bad faith. They'll open by calling me a liar, right? Or literally insulting, like this one guy did a video where we did an episode talking about, it was a nutrition episode, and he opened his video by calling me fat and said, why should we listen to this guy? Because he's fat. And I was like, well, and people in the comments were like, how is anybody supposed to take this seriously if you're starting with an insult, So there are a lot of things like that, where, sometimes people are just out there to have a lot of rage and, try to score points by insulting, or by insulting our experts or that kind of thing. And so that to me is disqualifying, and I don't engage with those. But when someone comes to us and they have a substantive response that says, "Hey, Adam, respectfully, I disagree," right? If we're starting there, then I always read those, and when it's on Twitter, I try to engage on Twitter, and other ones certain responses that we've gotten led to our corrections segment. For instance, we got a lot of when we did a segment about Tesla and about electric cars. It was about electric cars more specifically than Tesla, but there are a ton of response videos to that, and so we sort of combined all of those criticisms and we addressed them on the show. Yeah, there's only been more as time has gone on.
Yeah, are you, we got to talk. So this gentleman, David Perry.
Oh, yeah, David Perry. I love David Perry.
Mattress, what was it, Mattress Daily or Mattress?
He was writing for Furniture Today.
Furniture Today, there it was. And I went down a rabbit hole of just this whole world of Furniture Today and the subculture of people. And his, I'm willing to bet I've been in far more mattress stores than you have. So
yeah, if I can fill this in, is this columnist for a magazine called Furniture Today, which is a furniture industry trade magazine for people who work for mattress and couch sofa stores, wrote a column that was like, I don't know if anyone's seen this video, Adam Ruins Mattresses, where he's insulted the reputation of mattress stores owners, but we are going to stand up and defend our industry, Adam. You cannot tell us that we are scams. Many upstanding members of society work in the mattress industry, I'll have you know. And the thing was, he didn't actually offer any substantive, there was no like, here's a fact that was wrong or a statistic that you misrepresented or anything like that. It was just like, we shall stand up to defend mattresses. And I found it very sweet, because our our goal is to not to insult anybody. We thought we were having some nice fun with the idea of a scammy mattress salesman who I've encountered that type of person in my past. It's kind of funny that a mattress salesman is kind of similar to a sleazy car salesman in a lot of ways. I have no bad blood towards him at all. I found it to be a very sweet piece.
Yeah, I don't even really have a great question. I just thought him as an individual, it was just, we live in a time where everybody has a rebuttal, but his rebuttal was the most respectful and well done rebuttal I've ever seen. And it would have been nice, like you said, for him to have a fact or something to point to, but even with the absence of that, it was still like, I kind of like this guy.
Yeah, I came away liking him, and I'm not gonna argue with him that like the majority of people working in mattresses are fine, upstanding mattress salesmen, but that doesn't change the fact that most of these mattress stores are owned by one or two companies that are able to serially overcharge you and prevent you from comparison shopping by white labeling their products from store to store. So
not change that. Nice guy. Those things are still
yeah,
happening.
exactly.
Speaking of nice guys and all the people you talk to, you got a tour coming up. You're going out.
I do.
This is incredible. Tell me about the tour.
I'm doing a tour called Mind Parasites Live. It is a combination of stand-up and informational comedy. I call it kind of a psychedelic biology class. What it is there are these incredible biological parasites I learned about recently that actually control the minds of their hosts. There's like a fungus that controls the minds of ants. There's a barnacle that controls the minds of crabs. You've maybe heard about this a little bit. Yeah. The video game The Last of Us was based on this idea. But we sort of heard about this, but we don't, none of us have really unpacked it that much. And then I use that, I show a lot of these creatures on screen. They're very horrifying. I've written some jokes about them. And then I use that as a way to talk about the cultural parasites that are seeking to control our minds and behavior. The three that I talk about are alcohol, advertising, and the algorithm. And so it's sort of this journey from biology to sociology to back again, but all in sort of a stand-up comedy context. So, normally, my goal is if you buy a ticket to this show, you're going to laugh as much as you do at any night at the comedy club, but you'll also come away learning, a dozen or so incredible things and thinking differently about the world around you.
It's pretty amazing.
I'm taking it all over the country this spring.
When is it kicks off this spring? Where can people get info like tickets? And stuff
If you
like that?
search
Do you know
for
yet?
it on AXS.com,
Yeah,
I believe.
that's where it's gonna be.
And I'm about to throw the tour dates up on my website.
Very cool.
yeah.
So I was thinking, as you were talking about just walking away with a different look at the world around you and stuff. How has your worldview, having done this show, and I'm sure there are stories because you're not a know-it-all. You're a regular human being. I'm sure you're learning things as you're working on this show. How has it seeped into your normal life? How has it changed your outlook as you walk around?
The show's always been an extension of my outlook. The show that we started doing was just, it was based on this is how I was in my everyday life. Like, I was the person who, anytime somebody said something, I'd be like, I read an article a couple of years ago. I'm pretty sure I read a New Yorker article where they said, that's, I was that jerk. And so I just turned that into a comedy character. But these sorts of facts, this sort of constant undermining of what we think we know, this sort of endless curiosity and search for more knowledge. This is sort of the way that I've always been. The show has, in terms of how it's changed my approach to those things, I think I used to have a little bit more slam dunky of an approach to those topics. Like, this isn't true, kaboom! And the early show, I think, reflects that. Yeah. And now the topics that we do are more nuanced and have more complexity, and the answer isn't always as obvious. And so I think that comes across in the show now.
The show was born of a place that sort of had this moral imperative in a way of just like letting people know the truth and talking to people about the truth. And I joke about destroying blissful ignorance, but like with a positive intent. When did this show? You guys have been doing this for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong. Did you start before 2016?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So
the show. Well, the first segment of the show came on College Humor, I think, in 2014.
2014. That's what. So you've been doing it for a couple of years. Have you felt a shift? Has the mission of the show had to adjust as not just who's president and what's going on there, but how people converse and how we've become divided? Have you felt just more of like emboldened in your original mission? Have you been like, well, now we have to tackle these things because this is what's imperative right now? Has any of that culturally affected you guys and what you set out to do from the beginning?
That's a very good question. First of all, in terms of interfacing with day-to-day politics, we have always been very, very careful about when we do that, and our show is not topical, so we're not able to talk about the news of the day. But we do things that keep coming around, right? Yeah. Like we did a segment when Trump was running. We did a segment on here's why the wall didn't work. Here's why the wall wouldn't work. Excuse me. That was obviously spurred by the fact that Trump was running on it, but he didn't come up with the idea. It was an idea before that, and we did an episode on immigration because that's something that's in the news now. And the great thing about doing it that way is it's continued to be topical in the 3 years since. People are still sharing that video, obviously now, right? It's still an issue today. So we, when we take that approach, we find that it has relevance all the time. As for speaking to a country that's divided, even before the election in 2016, I always wanted to do a show that would speak to everyone in the country, that would be our goal. And that doesn't mean that every single person in the country is going to watch the show and, love it, right? Yeah. Obviously, there is that 5% of folks whose, minds are very closed and are not going to be able to get it. And I mean that on every issue. I'm not just talking about, people on one side of the spectrum. There's always those outliers, right? But I have always felt that I wanted to make a show that spoke to people where they were at and treated them with respect and gave them the opportunity to learn and grow by watching the show. And I'm proud to say that I think we've done that. Our gun episode, I used to say a couple years ago in 2015 that's not an episode that we would ever do because if you say to someone, hey, I'm doing an episode about guns, they're going to say, oh, okay, well, you better say what I want you to say. You're going to say my side, right? Because if you don't, I'm changing the channel. I'm watching you to see if you're going to be on my side, right? Whereas if I say, hey, I'm doing an episode about animals, they're like, ooh, what are you going to say about animals? I don't have any opinion about animals, you know? Yeah, nothing that strong. So that's why I thought, hey, these are the fault lines of American society, and I don't want to fall into them. I want to hit them where they're not looking. I want to go, because that's the truth. We are divided, but we're divided on just a few issues, you know? And so my strategy has always been, well, let's find a way of, let's go and talk about everything else that no one else on television is talking about, where people are more open-minded about, right? That being said, after 4 years of doing the show, we said, hey, we've gotten pretty good at making the show. There are a lot of misconceptions about guns and myths about them, and we can do an episode. We really think we can do an episode that can speak to everyone in the country, that everyone in the country can watch it and be challenged and have something to learn throughout the episode. And that doesn't mean that everybody loved it. A lot of people did not like that episode. But I still think that if those people took a second and slowed down a little bit and watched it again, went in with less of a I'm going to smack this down kind of mind and more of a here's, can I learn something kind of mind. I really do think that we did what we set out to do.
We're going to throw over to the audience in just a second. I got a question from Twitter we're going to take as well. Before we get to that, there's one last thing, because you've got the show, which is fantastic, and that, of course, is every Tuesday at 10/9 Central on TruTV.
Sure is.
You got old episodes of that on Netflix if you want to catch up.
You can go bone up on Netflix.
You got a tour coming this spring, which is a huge deal. And yesterday or today, you just launched a podcast, and I wanted you just to ask you about that really quick.
Sure.
As a man wearing PlayStation shoes,
You are wearing PlayStation shoes, so you're the right person to
about
ask.
this podcast, and then we'll get to the audience questions. But tell me a little bit about where this is coming from and why you're excited to do this.
Sure. So the podcast is called Humans Who Make Games. It's in partnership with IGN, the video game website, and Starburns, the podcast studio. And I've just been a video game player my whole life, and just is my favorite medium. It's my favorite hobby. And I wanted a way to get more involved in that world, but also I noticed that the people who make video games, you almost never actually hear their stories. You never hear from them. You hear about the new game mechanics and the new stuff you can do in the game and the graphics, but no one ever sits down with those folks and say, "Hey, how'd you get into video games? What was your first experience like? What was your career path? What made you make this? Where did you come to this idea, right, into this game?" And so I just wanted to have those conversations. Like the starting point was I just wanted to have those conversations with those people, yeah. And then I thought, well, hey, this is something that isn't really out there, and I think it really would be cool to fill a spot in the ecosystem that way. And so we interviewed for the first season. I interviewed, I think, 8 different game designers from who made a lot of big indie game designers, a few folks who work in AAA games, and you really get a lens into what life in that world is like as creatives. There's so many. I'm a comedian, right? And I can go on Mark Maron's show. I can go on Pete Holmes' show. Well, if they'd book me. Mark Maron hasn't booked me. But if, and talk about those things, right? We've got so much, go watch Pete Holmes' wonderful show, Crashing, to learn about the life of a comedian, right? Yeah. And, when you watch a movie, you hear, Tom Cruise will talk about what it was like to jump out of the plane. We don't get that about video games. That's what I wanted to give. So it's called Humans Who Make Games. And, you can find it on iTunes or do a web search for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's out there. So many things going on. All right. So our question, we have one audience question. It's coming from Twitter, and it's from @XOAvery, Zavery? I don't know. I'm sorry if I ruined that, but I'm going to read your question now, Avery. How do y'all choose what topics to discuss in the show and what areas of those topics?
Well, early on, John Krasinski. Is that their real name?
I don't think either
John
of those.
Krasinski Yee is their name. I don't even think their name is John Krasinski. This person is an enigma wrapped up in a mystery, and I'm really excited to find out who they are. But in the first couple years of the show, a lot of the topics were things that I had saved up that I was really excited to talk about, that I had read in articles that had stuck with me. Our original topic about De Beers creating the diamond engagement ring was something I had read in an article and always wanted to bring up. Always wanted to share that knowledge with people. People need to know about this. And then after a couple years, I sort of ran out of those things that I had stored up. Now I got a couple new ones every year. I'm still reading and learning, and so I go into every new season saying, hey, I really want to do something about this. I want to do something about guns. I just learned about this new fact about the Second Amendment. I really want to do it. But then, we've got a wonderful writing and research staff of who are really terrific. And to them, I just put the same thing to them as I put to myself of, hey, what do you folks want to see on television? And what are the stories that blew your minds that you heard this year that we have to share with the people, right? That's what we do. And the criteria is, if they tell us the story in the writer's room and it blows our minds in the writer's room, like if we're going like, what the, are you kidding me? Yeah, then it goes on the show. So then it goes on the index card board at least, and then our research staff goes and vets it, and they look into it, they make sure that it holds up, they make sure that the story is real. Yeah, and so we really put it through its paces.
Before you had the show and you were just a regular old comedian with a bunch of stories,
Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself just waiting at parties for opportunities to throw these facts out there?
Oh, yeah,
And
that's-
just like they
yeah.
sideline like double dutch.
That was my whole life, and people found it very annoying, and that's where the character came from. People were like, no, come on, why are you bringing this up? At my wedding, you're going to tell me about this, And then, that became the character. I remember watching Curb Your Enthusiasm as a young comedian, going like, oh, this is very cool what he did. He took his own personality and the things that suck about himself, and then he made comedy out of it, right? He amplified, yeah. And so that sort of stuck with me, and that was the same thing I tried to do on the show. It is sort of like a younger, stupider, worse, or not stupider, but more socially awkward version of me. Yeah.
Well, you do a hell of a job, man. Like I said, I love this show. You won me over. I didn't mean to phrase it in that way.
No.
But it is
Takes
a
a while.
fantastic show, and I'm excited that we've got a season 3 and more on the way. As I said earlier, I listened to the podcast. That's fantastic. The tour so much. Let's remind everybody all the details here. So Adam Ruins Everything is Tuesdays at 9 Central on TruTV. If you want to catch up, there's old stuff on Netflix. You can go catch the old episodes on Netflix. The tour is going to be in the spring. Keep an eye out for that.
Yep.
And
AXS.com for that.
AXS.com, and then the podcast, which Humans Who Make Video Games.
Humans Who Make Games.
Games, no video. I added that
video.
myself. I was printing there. Humans Who Make Games with Adam Conover. That's available where podcasts are available. So you go to iTunes, anywhere. You can listen to awesome podcasts. You know where that is. I'm grateful you came back. It was exciting to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys for being an awesome audience. Let's be super awesome and thank our amazing guest, Adam Conover, one last time.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, sir.